You know, with the war in Ukraine still dragging on, it feels like everyone's locked in, like that's the only conflict that matters right now. And sure, it is important, make no mistake. But here's the thing, while everyone's focused on Ukraine, other parts of the world are quietly starting to boil. And even if one of them blows up, it could actually pull in more firepower and collapse even more systems than Ukraine could ever do. Because we're not just dealing with one conflict anymore, we're looking at a global setup that's cracking in multiple places at once. Places that were never fully stable to begin with. Most of them, the media barely covers, if at all. But they do matter. A lot. In fact, they tie directly into global trade, military positioning, energy routes, and fragile alliances. I'm talking about Taiwan, the Balkans, the Arctic, and yes, even now, the Red Sea. Each one has its own kind of threat, but any one of them could actually flip the world on its head. So, in this video, I'll be breaking down what's actually going on in each of these regions, what the West isn't ready for, and why the next major conflict could hit way sooner than people think. Let's start off with Taiwan, because that's the one both China and the United States are laser focused on for a reason. Taiwan isn't just some little island caught between China and the United States. It's basically the crown jewel of the Indo Pacific area. The reason both China and America are locked in is simply this: they both see it as absolutely essential for their own long term strategy. So, for China, Taiwan represents national pride, regime legitimacy, and control over a vital geostrategic gateway in the South China Sea. Xi Jinping has been pushing this reunification narrative for many years, not just because he believes it, but because not taking Taiwan makes the Chinese Communist Party look very weak on its promises, especially at home. Now, for America, losing Taiwan would be very catastrophic, not just militarily, but also economically and symbolically for its image of being the global police. The island isn't just the beating heart of the global tech supply chain, thanks to TSMC, which makes nearly all of the world's most advanced microchips in the world. But it's more than just the chips. It's also a test whether United States power in Asia still means anything at all. If China does take Taiwan and Washington backs down, allies like Japan, South Korea, and yes, even the Philippines will probably start thinking twice about trusting the United States for the long term in having military assurances with America. That's the real reason this could turn into a war. Not because either side wants it, but because neither side feels they can afford to lose it. And when both sides think backing down is worse than fighting, that's where it gets dangerous for everyone. Now, what I have to say about Taiwan in terms of its importance to both China and America is this. China, for the most part, has a much stronger claim over the island, historically speaking, because Taiwan was once part of mainland China, not a separate country we all know and recognize today. That's why reunification matters to them more, for historical, political, and yes, even regional dominance over the Pacific. For the United States, Taiwan serves only two purposes: semiconductor production and containing China. But here's the problem with that. While the war in Ukraine is still ongoing, ask yourself all of this. What happens if Russia takes most, or if not all, of Ukraine? How would that reflect on America's promise to defend Taiwan? It wouldn't look good at all for America's image. The truth is, it wouldn't really matter as much as you would think, because China doesn't even need to invade Taiwan in the first place. A blockade alone would just be able to cripple it, and the United States wouldn't even be able to supply Taiwan like NATO does with Ukraine. And even NATO, surprisingly, is struggling to meet the supply demands that Ukraine even needs to hold off Russia. Not to mention that China is building a lot of aircraft carriers just to compete with America's naval dominance in the world. That is why you're seeing Trump pushing so hard for a Ukraine ceasefire deal of some sort. Not because he controls how it ends. Oh no, that will be up to Russia to decide on that. But because America simply can't juggle both conflicts at once, and we all know it. And there's another angle here I think you all should understand. Trump is bringing Taiwan's chip production factories back to the United States. So once that's gone, what's left to protect besides geopolitical pride? I mean, what purpose does it serve besides the whole freedom and democracy propaganda we've been told for how many years now? I honestly lost count. And finally, Trump's tariffs won't even help either in this situation. It's already causing problems to America's own economy, and it will make it even harder to fund Taiwan's defense in any future war or, God forbid, a blockade with China for that matter. But while the Indo Pacific is on the edge, there's another old school conflict that's quietly coming back. And this one's actually closer to home for Europe and the West, and that would be the Balkans. If there's one region that proves history doesn't really die, it's the Balkans. What's happening there right now is looking a lot like early warning signs of another crisis that will probably be happening soon. You have Serbia, who just recently signed a new military cooperation agreement with Hungary, and that's huge because Hungary, under Orban, is basically thumbing its nose at NATO these days, more so than the last couple of years. Now, on the flip side here, Croatia recently deepened its own military ties with Albania and, yes, even Kosovo, two longtime enemies of Serbia. So, what we're seeing is a real split forming, with a new mini blocks being drawn up inside Europe itself. You also have Bosnia, which is still stuck in the middle between Serbia and Croatia, and it's still fragile from the 1990s. And for those who don't know, recently, the Republic of Srpska, which is the Serbian part of Bosnia, is actively flirting with secession options. If this does spark off, it's basically game over for regional peace. A lot of this fallout is from how the West handled the breakup of Yugoslavia in the first place. NATO bombed Belgrade in 1999, which they then carved up the region without really fixing anything and walked away thinking the job was done. And now you still have unfinished wars that don't stay buried at all. This isn't just a local Balkan beef anymore. It's becoming a geopolitical puzzle, with Russia backing Serbia, Hungary going rogue, and the EU acting like everything's fine for the most part. If this does explode, it'll drain attention, resources, and yes, credibility from the West. Right when it can at least afford another mess like this, especially after Ukraine, in regards to even how that conflict will even end. So, where do I even start with the Balkans? Oh boy, if there's any unfinished mess in Europe, this is the place. Trust me. And once the Ukraine war wraps up, however that war ends, this region is going to heat up pretty fast in my opinion. The two main areas in the region to watch out for are as followed: Kosovo and, yes, Bosnia as well. Let's start off with Kosovo. Now, most of the world here doesn't even recognize it as a truly independent state for that matter. And for Serbia, it's more than just a land dispute. They see Kosovo as their historic heartland and birthplace of their first Orthodox Church, believe it or not. They also argue that NATO took from them through post-Cold War dominance in the region under the usual excuse of freedom and democracy for the Albanians, of course. But Serbia claims it was really about the region's untapped resources that NATO only wanted for themselves. Now, from the Albanian side of things, they say they've been there historically and that Kosovo's population is majority Albanian anyways, and that it belongs to them because of that argument, basically. You can clearly see now that this tension never really got resolved at all. And even just a year or two ago, Kosovo's president even warned that war could break out again depending on who wins in Ukraine. So let's just say if Russia does come out on top in the Ukrainian conflict, Serbia might see that as a green light to take some sort of military action. A chance, you could say, to launch its own, how would you say, special military operation into Kosovo under the same justification of protecting the ethnic Serbs that live there. Now, yes, for those who don't know, America does have a military base in Kosovo. Actually, it is the second largest in Europe, believe it or not. Well, until the one in Romania is built, or even if it's going to be built at all, is the question. But it doesn't mean that it's a guarantee of protection for anyone in the region. You also have NATO, which has burned through most of its military stockpiles by sending ammo to Ukraine, which was very foolish of them, and well, a lot of people could have predicted that. They just don't learn. Then you got Bosnia as well, probably the longest frozen conflict in Europe's post-Cold War, even before the Ukraine war even started, if you even think about it. It's basically a split along old imperial lines. You had the Ottomans, Austro-Hungarians, and yes, even the Serbs, who all left their mark on that country. Today, those divisions are still there, make no mistake about it. You still have three ethnic factions, one state, and a constant friction that is unresolved to this day. And recently, for those who don't know, the Bosnian government even issued an arrest warrant for the leader of the Republic of Srpska. That alone could just light a match for a renewal of that conflict all over again. Meanwhile, just a few weeks ago, you had Hungary and Serbia who both signed a military pact with each other, which, if I could say, was very much so unexpected if I'm being honest here. And on the flip side, you have Croatia, Albania, and Kosovo who also signed their own military alliance pact as well a few weeks after that one. Does this sound familiar? Kinda like World War I alliance webs all over again? Yeah. Concerning, I know. So look, I'd argue this whole instability is basically fueled by both NATO and Russia. We're actually seeing the fight already happening in Ukraine between both of them, and it's going to, in my opinion, spill over into the Balkans, unfortunately. Again, just to be clear, not that I want it to happen, I'm just being realistic in my observations on where the next conflicts are going to be happening. Now, there is something no one's really talking about that I've noticed regarding this particular conflict if it were to, how would you say, reignite. If it does go down, Russia will absolutely flood this region with its own weapon systems, the same way NATO has armed Ukraine. You can call it payback of sorts, and trust me, that's a piece of the equation people keep overlooking in how, let's just say, for argument's sake, Serbia, for whatever reason, getting a hypersonic missile for them to use. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you guys. I will in the future cover the Balkan region in one of my videos more in depth than what I'm covering currently right now. And I understand in this conflict there were a lot of war crimes from all sides, so no, I'm not being selective, just to be clear. Also, just remember guys to keep an eye out in that region for the next few years. That's all I'm saying. Now, while most of the eyes are focused on the Balkans and Taiwan, there's a whole different kind of flashpoint brewing up far north in the Arctic. And yeah, it sounds very quiet right now, but don't let the ice fool you here for a second. People don't really talk about the Arctic as much as you would think that they should, but trust me, the power players are. You have Russia, China, and yes, even Trump's America, who have all been obsessed with it, and for good reasons. As the ice melts, thanks to global warming, it's opening up new shipping lanes, new oil and gas fields, and new military routes as well. You have Russia, who's already been turning that region into a fortress for themselves, building over at least 50 plus Arctic bases and expanding their fleet of nuclear icebreakers. Then you have China, even though it's nowhere near in the Arctic, calls itself a near Arctic power and is pouring money into the Arctic mining and the shipping area. And here you have Trump. He's literally trying to buy Greenland from Denmark this year, not as a joke, but because Greenland is a geostrategic jackpot. It sits between the United States and Europe, has rich rare earth resources, and would give the United States serious control over Arctic sea lanes and even early warning radar coverages for nuclear missiles. Basically, the Arctic is the last untapped frontier, and every major player is scrambling to stake a claim before it becomes the next South China Sea. The danger here is that it's almost no rules or treaties for what happens when countries start pushing too far. Basically, one wrong move, like a disputed oil rig or downed surveillance plane, or even a collision in international waters, and well, we got ourselves another standoff between nuclear powers all over again. Now, I want to be very clear about this. When it comes to controlling the Arctic sphere, Trump is actually being very strategic. And I've mentioned that previously in multiple videos that I have given to you guys. But for the United States to really own half of it, taking Greenland wouldn't just be enough. Trust me, it would again also need to take Canada as well. And while nothing major has happened yet so far, America does already have 2 bases in Greenland, mind you. The reason this matters is simple. The Arctic is the next major battleground, packed with untapped resources and faster trade routes that bring serious geopolitical leverages. Right now, I would say the West is technically falling behind in this area. Russia's already been steadily building up its own military presence there for God knows how long, and China's already using the Arctic waters for trade, basically avoiding confrontation they would normally face anywhere else. Honestly, I see the Arctic becoming the new Middle East of sorts. You have resource-rich areas, but without the religious and the historical land ties that would make it even more difficult to hold on to. It's not really about the minerals though, if you really think about it here. It's about controlling that trade route. That's the major key point that I want to illustrate to you all, especially with Trump's tariffs on China and possibly continuations on the sanctions on Russia. But even if Trump pulls that off, it might not even matter in the end. Because China, for those who don't know, has already invested deep into the Belt and Road Initiative, basically giving them a backup trade route if things go sideways up in the Arctic. To put it simply, China is already ahead of the game for now, and well, for Russia, not really anything has changed for them in regards to their holdings in the Arctic Sea. Alright, now let's shift gears one more time to something that's already affecting the global economy in real time, and that would be the Red Sea, which isn't just heating up. Mind you, it's already turning into a straight up war zone as I speak. So the Red Sea is supposed to be one of the world's most important trade routes, linking the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean, through the Suez Canal. But lately, it's turned into a nightmare zone for everyone. You have the United States now currently bombing Yemen, specifically targeting the Houthi rebels, all because they're the ones who have been launching missiles and drones at commercial ships passing through the Bab el Manib Strait, if I'm not butchering that. This isn't just about oil, but it's also about the US trying to keep a foothold in the Middle East, while showing it can still keep global trade flowing in that area. The problem is, we're bombing one of the poorest countries on Earth, in a region that already hates us more by the day, and there's no real endgame in sight to resolve this issue. So here's the reality that we see in Yemen right now. America isn't going to dislodge them from the Red Sea blockade anytime soon. You can trust me on that. The US is still stuck on projecting this illusion of military invincibility, which, let's be honest, hasn't really held up since Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, or even through Ukraine by proxy. They'll say it's about keeping trade flowing through the Red Sea, and yes, I'll give them credit that it's partially true because of that. But the real reason they've been bombing Yemen these past few weeks is because the Houthis are backing the Palestinians in the Gaza war. That's the political pressure point, to be honest here. And even with all the airstrikes that is ongoing, it's not actually changing the blockade at all from what we're currently seeing, unless there's some sort of long-term ceasefire in Gaza, which isn't looking likely anytime soon, if I'm being honest. What's making things even more dangerous is Iran's involvement here, providing long-range missiles, maybe even some intel, and helping the Houthis target US ships. It's turning into basically another proxy war that could drag the US and its allies into a direct conflict with Iran. And that's a serious escalation no one really in the region really wants, and even here in America as well. Because if this spreads, the Red Sea crisis won't just be about trade anymore. It'll be about the next big flashpoint in a region that's already on edge as it is. And just a quick update. Apparently, although this could just be a rumor, American envoys in Oman were able to establish some sort of ceasefire for American ships passing through the Red Seas to be unharmed. Again, I cannot confirm nor deny, I'm just hearing from the grapevine. Make that for what you will. To conclude on all of this, from my observation, people are still stuck on Ukraine like it's the only thing that matters currently, which to be fair, it still does. But bigger issues that have been brought up by me says otherwise. Remember, you still have Taiwan, the Balkans, the Arctic, and yes, even the Red Sea, which are all heating up slowly for different reasons, but they're still sitting on the edge of popping off. These aren't just local issues that don't matter, but I would disagree. They are in fact global pressure points, and even if one of them snaps, it won't just stay contained. It will spill out very quickly, making it difficult for people to react as needed. Now, I'm not just fear-mongering at all here. It's just the direction things are heading, if you just pay attention. The world is currently stretched thin as it is. You have alliances that are cracking in some form or another, and the old rules don't really hold up the same weight like they used to. What comes next isn't going to be clean, and it sure won't be predictable. Just take a look at the Pakistan-India border clash that just happened a few days ago as an example. You see my point? So now the question for you all is, which one breaks first? And when it does, how far does it go? Otherwise, guys, if you can leave a like, subscribe, and also leave a comment, I'd greatly appreciate it. Have a great day.